Today we're talking about having difficult conversations. So
And
communication is a cornerstone of healthy relationships, right? But sadly, many of the relationships that I see are really the communication is based on a faulty framework. And so the goal in many of these communication styles and many of these conflicts is for one partner, I see one partner trying to enlighten the other so that they will change. One of the things I often hear in this kind of a relationship dynamic is, I just can't get through to him. She just doesn't get it, right? This kind of communication. And it's like they are trying so hard to communicate to their partner, this is my expectation. This is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to hear. This is what I want you to understand. This is how I'm feeling. And we're so trying to get the other person to see something, to understand something, to listen or to hear something, and it just feels like it's falling on deaf ears, right? This is where so much of that whole fight about, I've asked him 50 times to take out the garbage and he just doesn't do it, he won't do it. Monday came and went and the garbage truck was gone, and then I realized way too late that he didn't take the garbage out, right? And so the same fight keeps happening over and over again. And so much of the conflict that I see, again, it revolves around behavior, right? Or circumstances. So people are usually upset about a circumstance that exists, or they're upset about a behavior that they are unable to control in another person. And so what I like to say is that it can feel like trying to pull a water buffalo out of a lake that they just don't want to come out of, right? We're trying so hard to get this person to understand something and to see something differently, to do something differently. And gosh, that resistance gets so exhausting. And we begin to feel frustrated. We begin to feel disrespected. We begin to feel like we're not being heard. Nobody's getting through to anyone. And we just keep repeating these same cycles, these same fights. And so what I want to talk about today is this idea around having difficult conversations, and that there's a new way to have these conversations. There's a new framework to having these conversations that will change your relationships forever for the better. The idea that there's a right way of understanding a problem or a wrong way of feeling about a situation needs to go away. I'm going to say that again. The idea that there's a right way for understanding a problem. So here's our circumstances, right? There's a right way to see it and there's a wrong way to see it. My way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. That needs to go away. As well as the idea that there's a wrong way to feel about a situation. That also needs to go away. So the fact that our credit card bill is so high, I feel scared, frustrated by that. Whatever the feeling might be for you, and your partner, you may be perceiving that they're feeling apathetic. It doesn't bother them, and that's quote unquote wrong, right? And so this is the communication framework that's how we approach the conflict. That's how we approach the conversation, is from that assumption and that baseline. And so I want to invite you to release that approach and try something different. I want to invite you to at least consider letting go of the idea that your partner needs to see your side, that your partner needs to understand where you're coming from. I want to invite you to let go of the approach of trying to quote unquote get their mind right. I want to invite you to let go of that idea, that they need to see it from your perspective, that they need to understand where you're coming from. Again, what that is you trying to go into a situation that you cannot control. You cannot control their willingness to understand. You cannot control their capacity to understand. You cannot control anything about them. And so if that's what we're trying to do, is pull them over to our side or help them to see something that they are either unwilling or unable to see, God, it's like, how long have we tried this? If it's working, then that's great. If you have a partner that's willing to listen and you guys have these conversations really easily and really smoothly, that's phenomenal. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you're in a situation where you feel yourself doing this and you're just not getting through to them, and you're repeating this cycle, I want to invite you to consider a different approach. Okay, so there's a new framework that I want to talk about today. And I wrote out the model here behind me because this is the coaching tool that I use. And this worksheet that we're going to go through, of course, is based on these ideas. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But here's the tenets, if you will, sort of the fundamental pillars of this new framework that I'm going to give you. The first is that circumstances are neutral. So circumstances, the facts of a situation. There's dog poop in the front yard. The credit card bill is $2,000. Your mother texted and asked if we're still coming over for Christmas. Something, these are facts that you could prove in a court of law that we can all agree on. You make the fact mean one thing. They see something totally different when they look at that specific situation, right? So it's just a circumstance. It's neutral. The second pillar of this framework to understand is that emotions are created by our thoughts, not by circumstances and not by behavior. We so often believe that our emotions are tied to a circumstance. We believe that our emotions, I'm angry, the reason I'm angry is because there's dog poop in the front yard. But the reality is that's not why you're angry. You're angry because you have a thought, you have a belief that there should not be dog poop in the front yard. That it was his job to clean up the dog poop today, and he didn't clean up the dog poop. Therefore, I'm pissed. Does it make sense? Or you think you're angry or frustrated or resentful or whatever emotion is that you're feeling, you think that emotion, that feeling, you think it's coming from the fact, from the circumstance that your husband is drunk or that your wife is drunk. So if you put intoxicated partner in this circumstance line, right? Drunk husband, he admits he's drunk, everyone can see he's drunk, he's clearly drunk, and you think that is why you're angry or that's why you're resentful. But the reality is that I'm trying to show you, and that I will show you as we work together over time, is that it's not the fact that he or she is drunk or that they are drunk. That's not the reason you're upset. The reason you're having that feeling is because the thought that you're having a thought, he shouldn't be drunk. I wish he wouldn't drink. Whatever the thought might be. And so there could be somebody else, same exact circumstance, drunk husband, drunk partner, and their thought could be that it's totally fine. It might not bother them at all. They might think, sweet, great, I'll get drunk too. Maybe they also have a drinking problem. And the fact that their partner has one doesn't make them feel so ashamed. Who knows? There's multiple ways, there's multiple filters that you can see that circumstance through. There's multiple filters that you can interpret that circumstance through. So 5 different people could have 5 totally different emotional responses to the exact same situation because the circumstance is neutral. The emotion or the feeling that you have about that circumstance is entirely dependent on the thought that comes into your head when you notice it. There's a story that you tell yourself. There's a thought that you think. They should do this. They should not do that. It should be different, right? And they have a different emotion because their thought about that circumstance is different. So we're going to talk about this more when we do our one-on-one coaching, when we talk about everything that's going on for you. But I just want you to understand this model. These are some of the really important fundamentals to know before we go into this worksheet about how do you have difficult conversations in a new way that instead of having conflict by trying to get them to change, which is always where conflict comes from, almost always. The other thing is from our thoughts that they should change. But instead of approaching it that way, I want to show you a way to approach it that fosters connection and communication, healthy communication that runs so much smoother and that's actually effective. Okay. And so we're going to talk about that. But in order to go into the worksheet and talk about that, you need to understand these are the pillars of this new framework for how to have difficult conversations. So the first is that circumstances are neutral. The second is that emotions are created by our thoughts, not by circumstances, and not by the person's behavior. It's how we interpret that behavior that creates the emotion. The third thing to understand is that emotions are neither right nor wrong, but they do drive our behavior. So it is okay. It's not wrong to be angry. It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have grief. It's okay to feel disconnected. It's okay to feel happy. It's okay to feel joyful. It's okay to feel content. The emotion is neither right nor wrong, but it is important to understand that it is what drives our behavior. And so the thing to ask is, am I getting the result that I want? Is this working for me? There are times that I want to feel angry. And then there are times where I recognize that my anger, my resentment is really fueling actions and behaviors that are not serving me. There are times that I recognize that I am feeling emotionally exhausted from carrying this around and I am ready to feel something new. There are times that I want to feel sad or express grief, but I don't want to get stuck in it, right? I don't want to stay there. I don't want to get stuck there forever. And so my question for you is always not as much about shame. Shaming is never helpful, or judging ourselves, that self-judgment piece about, oh, I shouldn't feel this way or they should not feel that way. I think the more useful question is, what is it getting us? What is that emotion creating? How do I show up in my relationship? How do I show up at work? How do I parent my kids when I'm feeling creative? How do I parent my kids when I'm feeling apathetic? How do I parent my kids when I'm feeling resentful? How do I show up for my partner? How do I have difficult conversations when I'm feeling fill in the blank? When I'm feeling jealous, when I'm feeling distrustful? What is that emotion getting us? So that's the important thing to understand. And so what we're going to do in this worksheet is go through a new way to have these difficult conversations. And so instead of trying to get someone else to understand our emotions, instead of getting someone else to try to understand our opinions, our stories, our perspective, in order for them to change, if they could just understand what I'm thinking, feeling, how frustrated I am, if they could just see my side, then they would do things differently. Or if they would just change their behavior, I wouldn't have to feel this way. This is so often the way we approach things, and I do not believe it's useful. I think it's exhausting and it doesn't really work. So instead of trying to get someone else to understand us, instead of getting someone else to change, what I'm going to show you is how to spend our time and our energy understanding theirs instead. Because that is something we can control. I don't have to pull the water buffalo out of the lake. What if I just went and sat in the lake with that water buffalo for just a moment to try and understand what's going on for her? Because here's the kicker. They don't need to understand my side of the story. Only one person in the relationship needs to understand both sides. And sometimes when you do this, you will have an opportunity to be heard as well. However, it's not a guarantee, and it's also actually not even necessary. And I'm going to show you how this works as we go through the worksheet. But this is where the magic happens, because again, just like with managing expectations, just like with drawing boundaries, the theme that is running through all 6 weeks of this course is, what are the things we can control? What are the things that we cannot control? We spend so much energy over here trying to control other humans, and it creates so much stress and conflict in our relationships. If we are able to release that and look right here in front of us at, hey, here's all the shit that I can control, that I can do, And when you begin working, as Stephen Covey calls it, in your own circle of influence, your influence grows. And I'm just going to run through this model really quickly, and just so I can show you, here's the way that we approach conflict most of the time, is that we want to talk about the circumstances. We want to talk about the facts, right? So many people focus on the facts, right? No, you said these words, not those words. No, you drove to that store, not this one. Actually, hold on. Let me show you the facts, the facts, the facts, the facts. The facts are, and we use these facts to justify our own position. And here's the thing I want to tell you is you can always, always, always justify your own position. Always. It doesn't matter what it is. You can justify it. I will always be able to find a reason in my brain to make my position justifiable. But my question for you is, what is that getting you? To feel justified, to be justified? Is it actually moving your relationship forward? Because what I want to submit is that the facts don't really matter. And when we go through this worksheet, I'm going to show you how this format, the facts are not what's important. What's important is, what is my partner making those facts mean? What is the filter that she's seeing it through? That's what matters. Because same facts, but we're both seeing it so differently. And the way that we see it, which side of the building, there's 4 walls on a building, those walls can all look very different. Same building, different perspective. And so it's not as much about arguing about the facts as it is understanding the perspective. The other thing that we so often focus on is down here, behavior, right? Behavior, behavior, behavior. We want to change another person's behavior. And so we spend all our time arguing about these two things. But what I want to show you is that the circumstances are what trigger our thoughts, right? There's dog poop in the yard. I think the thought, there should not be dog poop in the yard. That thought produces a feeling, an emotion. And it is from that place, it is from that emotion that behavior is generated. It is from that emotion that actions are taken and behaviors are generated. And so here's the thing, and that's what creates our results, right? And then a fight comes, and then whatever. Now I argue. Now I'm yelling at my partner. You should have done this. You shouldn't have done that. You were supposed to do this. You should, whatever, right? The behavior, the actions are generated from all of this. And so there's all this stuff, which is honestly the biggest portion of our life. Every result in your life, money, time, your weight, your finances, your business, your career, your kids, your relationships, every single result in your life, anything that you have that you want, anything you have that you don't want, it's literally like 90% of it lives right here. This is the important part. This shit doesn't really matter that much. And this stuff, the behavior matters, but it's 10%. It's the top of the iceberg. There's all this stuff that's been below the iceberg, and we don't even go there because we're so focused on that 10%, that behavior change that we want to see. And it's important because it's like the needle that moves our life. But what moves the needle? We're sitting here trying to force behavior change, but we don't ever go in and look at what in the heck is driving it. What is the root? What's underneath it? And so if I can teach you how to do this, the behavior will change naturally. The connection will come, the conflict will dissolve, the stress will be reduced, and you guys will have healthier relationships, and you will have difficult conversations so much more smoothly.